Last year for 31 for 31, I had to do a swap out once I found out that First Strike is actually Police Story 4. I didn't want to skip over a film in the franchise, so I decided to move First Strike to this year so I could pick up Police Story 3 Supercop, also just known as Supercop in the US. It's worth noting that there are two cuts of the film, the Hong Kong release and the US release, the US release just being a shorter version where the Hong Kong release is the full film. Now I do later in this series cover a film where I watch both the theatrical and director's cut, but I didn't do that here because basically the US cut is just a shorter version for no reason, and I'm content on just watching the full cut of the film and calling it done. Supercop picks up back with Inspector Chan, played by Jackie Chan. This time they're looking for a super cop, and of course Chan is the perfect choice. So Chan is sent to team up with Michelle Yeoh's character to go undercover to bust up a Chinese drug dealer. This time Stanley Tong takes over the direction from Jackie Chan, and it's a notable decrease in direction. Supercop is a lot of fun. So far the Police Story films have been an absolute blast, but the film leans a little harder on being a comedy while not being able to kind of balance both the comedy and darker tones as well as the other two films. There's several moments in the film that it feels like it's supposed to be played seriously but feels a little too light to kind of carry it. There's times where the film is begging to be taken more seriously, but the comical tone takes away from some of the tension. However, you swap out some of the tonal inconsistencies for a really solid plotline as Jackie and Michelle's characters go deep undercover. This setup can lead to some truly funny moments while also having some really intense moments as well that can shift a little bit more gracefully thanks to its stronger narrative structure that the film actually has. Chan's character isn't really explored anymore here, rather it's just a job and he's the right person for it. The other two films really explored Chan's character, and here we get a much more one-dimensional character that's really propped up by Michelle Yeoh's character. The two have some really good on-screen chemistry that's really helped to alleviate some of the lack of character development that I was really missing in this third installment. Now let's talk about the goods. Going into a Police Story film after the first two, my main question is, how are the stunts? And they're really good here as well. Also leading into those beloved outtakes during the credits. There's some big spectacle set pieces that are a lot of fun, the hand-to-hand combat is great, and there's some stunt work with a helicopter and a train that's honestly kind of mind-blowing. If you like stunt work, then this, along with the first two films, are a must-watch. The bombastic set pieces are really what carries a lot of water for the film, where the first two films had these great set pieces that also had great characters to kind of back it. Supercop mainly just has these great set pieces that are, in terms of the action, on par with the first two films, even if there's slightly less of it here. This is just a lot of fun and is a must-watch for action fans, and it's nice to see Chan's Inspector Chan again, even if it as a whole felt a little unnecessary as a continuation to the first two films. I definitely recommend checking this one out, and it does add as a good third installment to the series, and I'm giving this one a 7 out of 10. And now I can finally check out First Strike. Well, just when I thought I was caught up to finally watch First Strike, lo and behold, there's a direct sequel to Supercop, also directed by Stanley Tong, released in 1993. This being more of a spin-off for Michelle Yeoh's character, but I ended up picking up the film on VHS because the DVD is like right at the, this is a little too much money for a DVD when I feel like it's probably going to get a Blu-ray port at some point price. Plus, the VHS was dirt cheap. However, I did watch the film with an English dub because that was the only option that's available, which honestly might have made the experience a little worse, but it did kind of help me get to the end of the film because the film itself was pretty boring, and that led to some funny moments. The film follows Michelle Yeoh's character after the events of Supercop, where Hong Kong requests her to stop a gang of thieves. Michelle's character feels somewhat less developed as a main character than she did as a side character in Supercop. Sure, we get some conflict set up with her boyfriend who ends up being involved in the gang that she's trying to stop, but we don't really build their relationship. We don't really see the conflict through her character, but rather is just blatantly told this for the story. Nothing here feels organic whatsoever. Everything feels like it's only here because the story needs something to move along to get to the next scene. Michelle does a great job in the lead despite the bad dubbing, but she doesn't really have the screen presence like she did in Police Story 3. She's the main character, but she doesn't really feel like a main character. But we're talking about a film connected to the Police Story universe, right? How's the action? It's fine. It's fine. It's nothing like the previous three films and feels pretty scaled back. The stunt pieces are nowhere near Police Story 3. It's rather just kind of standard gunplay and hand-to-hand action that any other 90s action thriller you'd rent from the video store would have had. There's plenty of it, sure, but none of it's very more memorable. The film is on the shorter side of clocking in at just over 90 minutes for this cut of the film. While I definitely felt the runtime, I didn't really hate my time with this movie either. There's large, uninteresting sections of the film, but it's a film that I don't think requires a lot of your attention. It would be a solid background movie. Doing some house chores or want something in the background to peek up at when the action gets going, here's Supercop 2, and I'm giving this one a 5 out of 10. Finally, on to First Strike, the fourth installment into the Police Story series, and a film that I've been looking forward to since last year when I had to redraw it. And I am unfortunately here to say that so far, this is my least favorite in the franchise. First off, the Blu-ray release only comes with the English dub. There's no original Cantonese here. Also, the film is heavily cut, clocking in at only 84 minutes, which according to the IMDb, the runtime is actually 107 minutes. However, I don't really want those extra 20 minutes because I struggled to stay awake with this one. Jackie Chan returns as Inspector Chan, but in the English dub, they literally just call him Jackie instead of the character's actual name. This time, Chan is hired by the CIA to recover a nuclear warhead, along the way going to Australia and taking on Russians as well as a shark. Every complaint I have about Police Story 3 Supercop is felt here tenfold. Directed again by Stanley Tong, Chan's character gets zero development and actually feels kind of like a reduction from a Supercop into a blundering clown that doesn't feel like this kind of carefree martial arts badass like in the previous movies. The movie leans way harder into the comedy, and it's very basic, one-dimensional and almost childish comedy that was way more cringe than funny. This film has no identity compared to the large line of Jackie Chan movies like the 3 previous installments. I'd actually go as far to say that this one's probably my least favorite Chan movie I might have seen, at least from memory. The music in the film is also horrendous and feels like stock string hits that would have been used in like a parody movie, but it's used earnestly here. Every scene feels strung together, but with little connecting tissue that feels like if you just like dip out to go use the restroom and came back, it would feel like a completely different movie. Each scene only feels like it's here to be set up for some kind of lackluster action set piece. Speaking of those set pieces, this is probably the most bland and forgettable in the series so far, except for 2 scenes that I thought were standouts in the film, and honestly might make worth watching the film alone just for those. The first one being right towards the beginning of the film with snowboarding, and the other was a pretty impressive underwater fight scene. These 2 scenes were great that were unfortunately used for this movie. The first 3 installments in the Police franchise are 100% worth a watch, while Supercop 2 and First Strike I really wouldn't recommend that much, and I'm giving First Strike a 5 out of 10. It's mainly bumped up from a 4 because I thought those 2 action set pieces were great, so I'm going to give it a 5 instead of a 4, but yeah, it's a 5 out of 10. This one was pretty disappointing.